So good morning. We spoke yesterday about an interesting case. The case was you have a parent, Lalenu, who is Mechalel Shabbat b'Farhesia. The parent desecrates Shabbat publicly. So you have an issue on Friday night. We're supposed to make the Kiddush with non-mevushal wine that hasn't been processed. It's more mehudad, it's more beautiful, it's more elevated, it's finer, it's higher quality. And therefore, on Friday night, we're supposed to use non-mevushal wine. Of course, we know the challenge with that is that the housekeeper, the goy, whatever it might be, in this case, the parent who's Mehalel Shabbat is holding up the cup of wine to say the Kiddush. So now what do you want to do? So first thing is, if the person who's holding up the cup of wine to say the Kiddush is Mehalel Shabbat Farhesia, publicly violating Shabbat, then don't use non-mevushal wine, use mevushal wine. So now if I use mevushal wine, I dodged the bullet. That's one way around the problem. Now what if, on the other hand, the person knows the law and he wants to use the finest, which really is supposed to. Now you have a question on whether the Jewish person who's Mehalel Shabbat b'Farhesia knowingly doing this, whether he would be considered a mumar or a kofed, whether he's someone who has thereby placed himself as a negator, as a denier of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore, how can I be Yotzei Yedei Chovah?
Is that a different category than just Mechalel Shabbat publicly?
Very nice, very nice, very nice. So that becomes the question. Perfect. The question becomes, is someone who's Mechalel Shabbat publicly, do we put him in the category today of a mumad? Do we put him into the category of someone who's kofer be'ikar or not? So there are certainly opinions who say yes, in which case you should say the Kiddush quietly to yourself while he's saying the Kiddush. Have a cup, your own wine in your hand, and be yotzei with that. What about the other people on the table? Okay, it's a little bit of a problem.
So is there a problem not just with the actual cup? Because I was going to say, while he's doing the Kiddush, a lot of times you have your own cup.
Right. So you have to have your own cup and you have to say your own berachot, because you're not going to be yotzei on his beracha. When he's mekadesh the Shabbat, now what? I can't be yotzei. Either I can be yotzei from his beracha or I can't. If he is not qualified to say a beracha, halachically qualified, then I certainly can't fulfill my obligation based on his action, right? So one option is bring yain mevushal. It doesn't matter, in quotation marks, right? It's not ideal, but it doesn't matter that the Mechalel Shabbat is saying the Kiddush. He is not outside of the spectrum halachically. He's still within the spectrum because it's mevushal and he's not defiling the wine. Okay, he could say it. I can listen to it. Everybody's okay. What about if it's not mevushal wine, and that's what you've always had in the house, and now we have a problem where the guy who's saying the beracha might be considered a mumad or a kofer, and now we have a problem. So we have a couple of interesting perspectives on it, including that of the Chazon Ish and so on. The Chazon Ish and others say that if the person prays the tefillot of Shabbat, right? Let's say he prays the tefillot of Shabbat, and then unfortunately he gets in a car and he does what he does, right? Effectively how we all grew up, right? Good. Okay. So
He's not denying.
He's not denying, beautiful, because in Tefillot of Shabbat specifically, he's saying over all of those things that affirm the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world the way it was described in Sefer Bereshit, and that the culmination of that creation was Shabbat. That's all identified in the tefillot. This person says all that, therefore he's not kafir, he's not a denier, and therefore if he picks up the wine, it's still okay. Another rub on it, and these are things that are important to know from the perspective of honoring a parent, honoring people. Another rub is that, what do you consider a tinok shenishpa? Who do you consider as a person who didn't ever have a chance to know this? Where you said tinok shenishpa, the classic tinok shenishpa, is a person who was kidnapped at birth and raised by a non-Jewish family, tinok, a baby, shenishpa, who was captured, who was kidnapped. Yeah? So the tinok shenishpa, in classic terms, is a person who was taken as a baby and therefore could not know the halachot. So if that person has been halal Shabbat, let's say to our example, you can't blame him. So the question becomes, in this day and age where everybody has access to everything, can we still call a person a tinok shenishpa? That becomes a little more of a judgment call. Some of the rabbis who are very, very tough say, no, you can't call anybody tinok shenishpa, or almost nobody, because there's social media. In the state of Israel, there are religious people everywhere, more so than here where it's somewhat segmented. The religious people in certain communities, the religious people in other communities. Over there, it's much more integrated, let's say. And therefore, some of the rabbis say, you can't call someone a tinok shenishpa, and therefore, if he picks up the wine, it might be a problem. But we hold, it's based on the Hazon Ish and others, we hold that, if a person didn't have the opportunity, he should be considered tinok shenishpa, like a baby who was kidnapped, and we try to give him the room, the teaching, the so on. So in this case, ideally, don't use the non-mevushal wine. Don't use it. Come with mevushal wine. Come with mevushal wine. If the person said the beracha and prays every Shabbat, you really don't have a problem because there's no issue of kefirah here, and we're not going to call him umar under any circumstances. Yeah.
What's the difference between saying the kiddush and saying the prayers? Meaning, you're saying kiddush and you're sanctifying.
I love it. You would hold, right? Chaim Yitzchak would hold. Listen to me. If someone is saying the prayers, the kiddush, and he's sanctifying the Shabbat with the kiddush, and he knows what he's saying, what's the difference if he says the kiddush or says the prayers in the Amidah? Exactly. It's the same thing. I think that's a very strong argument to say that. Assuming he knows what he's saying when he says the kiddush, I think it's a very strong argument. Okay. And you would say the same thing.
Okay.
Beautiful. How about halal Shabbat private, not public?
Okay, very nice. So less overt, right? It's not overt, it's not public, right? So in that case, we can't consider the person mumar, right? Sure. He would never ever get close to that category. And again, we're better off, I guess, you would still say better off bringing the mevushal wine, but you'd have much less of an issue, and you're okay. Now, again, in these cases, whenever we have a doubt, it's always best whenever we have a doubt to say the kiddush with the person. Like sometimes you go to someone's house for a friend or something, and the person is saying the kiddush, you're not sure if they understand the words they're saying. You're just not sure. Now, if the person doesn't understand the words, how could he be motzi me? If he doesn't understand what he's saying, how could he fundamentally fulfill the obligation?
Also, besides the
Mechalal Shabbat. Much simpler issue. You have a much simpler issue. Where you're going to a person who's megamgem, let's say, a person who's struggling, breaking his teeth a little bit on the words. You say that, the person may not know. Okay, this guy he's Shomer Shabbat. In that case, it's a good idea to say the Kiddush quietly, under your breath, by yourself, so that you're sure that you fulfilled it. So, I'm going to read it from here just to complete the review and then move on. V'im en sham yain mevushal. There isn't any mevushal wine, and the person who's mechalel Shabbat says the beracha. V'ava aviv ha'chiloni v'kidesh al hayayin she'eno mevushal yatz'u yedei chovat kiddush. We're still going to say that everyone fulfilled the obligation. Why? Because we're not going to put anybody, almost anybody, into a category of a mumad, of a naysayer, of a kofed, of someone who's against the Torah, of someone who's openly denying God and His creation. We're not going to do it in the context of Kibud Av V'em, and we talked about it on a more expanded basis, maybe in the context of people in general. Okay? Chatchila haben yitchamek milit'om ma'ayim te'onot shonot. If the wine is not mevushal, and the person who said the beracha is a mechalel Shabbat farhesia, publicly violates Shabbat, okay, the father technically made the wine of a goy, not yayin nesach exactly, but the wine of a goy, and the son shouldn't taste it at that point. Aval im yesh chashash. But if there's a concern that not tasting the wine, she'im yimna atzmo milit'om mehayayin, hadavar yigrom lemachloket lahakato shel aviv ma'torah shmirat hamitzvot yachol lismoch al haposkim hamekilim ve'sovrim shemutar lit'om miyayin she'avar u'mezagom mechalel Shabbat faresia kazeh hanoheg teresh itpalel b'dei pa'am. He's saying, but if there's an issue where the father is mechalel Shabbat, publicly mechalel Shabbat, and the wine is not mevushal, and we have a question, according to some of the more stringent opinions, he turns that wine into a forbidden wine. That's true, there are opinions like that, but there are opinions that say absolutely not, and therefore, if there's a possibility that there's going to be a breach, that there's going to be a distancing as a result, that the father's going to be embarrassed or hurt, or there's going to be some type of negative cause in the family, the son should taste the wine, and everybody's yotzei yedei chova.
I think this is a huge comment right here. This is like, because, this is huge.
It touches on, not directly, but it touches on the point that you and I discussed when we spoke over the phone. It touches on not the exact halacha, but it touches on the sensibility. And I think what you were speaking about was the sensibility. What is the sensibility here? What do people make decisions on in cases? We're going to talk about your case specifically. But how do people make decisions? What's the sensibility behind the decision when you decide to do something or not do something in the context of Shabbat, in the context of mom and dad? What is the sensibility? I think the sensibility, coming from the word sensible, is the operative term. And sensible is not easy. To be sensible is not easy. Because to be sensible means I'm going to stick my neck out a little bit. And I'm not going to be, I'm going to stick my neck out. And I'm going to subject myself to the possible criticism of someone somewhere. And I have to be willing to do that for the sake of a greater good. And I'm not criticizing anybody or judging anything because we have to go into the specific halachot that you mentioned. But I'm going to do a handful of things around that issue to build an overall framework. But this sets the platform.
So I've been around situations like this. Not my situation, but friends. Broken families.
Broken families.
Rabbi, broken families. One, you shower on Shabbat. This exact case. I can't drink wine in your house. I can't, like, flat brother-in-law's sukkah. This little branch hanging over the side. Not kosher. We're not eating. Sitting there like this, folded arms.
Folded arms.
Folded arms. Like
I've seen it as well. My sense is it's going to grow to be more the norm rather than the exception. And our community will grow more religious Maybe less of a community. It might become less of a community, more than likely will, which is very sad and unfortunate. And I'm not criticizing anybody, and there are cases where you have to be firm, and we're going to talk about some of those as well. But, Ezel Chacham inav brosho, right? The Chacham is the person who sees where this or that event is going to lead. We have to be that way. And we have to be willing to understand v'chai bahem. The laws were meant to be lived with, not to be destroyed with. Again, it doesn't mean that we go out and eat, this, that, the other thing. Doesn't mean there's an absolute randomness and disregard. Of course not. 1,000,000% not. But there's a human being sitting right over there with whom I share an essential, sensitive relationship.
I like that comment a lot. I like what you just said. I want to write it down.
Okay.
The laws were meant to be lived with, not destructive. It's a good one.
Okay. So we're going to do more of these. We're going to talk more about these classes, more about these issues. Okay, and we'll have another one right now. How's that, Joe? We have another one right now. This is a very, very interesting case, and will also teach us a number of important elements around halakha in general, around kibud av va'em specifically, and about the sensibilities that we need. Ben shorab enam shomrim Torah mitzvot. A son whose parents are not shomer Torah mitzvot. V'nisa b'derkei noam shadlan varech al ma'achal or mashkeh shemagish lahem. And in a very loving and kind way and respectful way, he's tried to encourage them to say a beracha on the food or drink that he brings them out of the halacha of kibud av va'em. So based on his halachic responsibilities as a son, to be mehabed his mom and dad, he has to serve them, right? He has to anticipate their needs, and he has to respond to their requests. Now they request him to bring, food and drink. He knows they're not going to say the beracha. Now, can I put somebody in a position to fail halachically? On the one hand, it's a little bit of a nuanced case, and this is how we're going to build our whole, a good portion of understanding on work. On the one hand, I have to listen to my father's request. And I can't dodge the bullet on this one, because this is black and white, Shulchan Aruch. My father tells me to bring him a drink, I have to bring it. Nothing to talk about. But my father's not going to say beracha. So by bringing him the drink, am I being over on the biblical prohibition of Lifnei Iver lo titen mechshol, of don't put a stumbling block in front of a blind man? It's a fun case. On the one hand, I have a biblical obligation to serve him, right? On the other hand, I have a biblical obligation not to put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. Now, there's literal cases on that, and there's maybe more expansive cases. We're going to see if there are or not. I've asked him to say a beracha. He says, next, give me a break. Whatever he says. He's not interested, right? So by fulfilling the obligation of kibud av, by bringing him the drink, am I putting a stumbling block in front of him because he's not going to say the beracha? And in that case, is it a biblical commandment versus a biblical prohibition? You with me? Yeah? Moshe?
I'm with you with the... What does Einam Shomrim B'mitzvot mean? What's the bar for that?
I don't know.
Like that to me, what you're talking about with where the community's going, that definition is the important part.
It is, and that's the whole point. There is no definition. We have to have eyes in our heads, so to speak. We have to be thoughtful. We have to think about tomorrow and the next day, not only this minute. We have to think about the purpose of halakha, not simply the execution. And we have to be smart. So we need to understand that halakha was meant to be meant with and built with. And that's why I'm making the point. Now, if it's black and white, somebody's picking up a gun to kill somebody, let's talk about. We're going to stop the person. Let's talk about, right? But if we have situations here, which according to some might be black and white, I want to show you a few cases that are not quite. And therefore, we're not going to turn our back on halakha ever, but we are going to be considerate of life and circumstances and children and family and chevra and all those considerations. The rabbis in this community made a decision. I remember my father used to invite me into the living room. I was a little kid. You had Cham Yaakov Katzin and others, and he would tell me, come in here, sit over there, don't say a word. And they would be deliberating questions like, if someone does something very negative, let's say it's Mechalel Shabbat Farhesia, that was an easy case, they were not going to push that person away. But let's say somebody does something else. Let's say somebody does something else to hurt the community. Let's say, are you going to send him his koracha home and make it clear to him that he's disinvited from the synagogue? We had a synagogue in the community that did exactly that. There were 2 synagogues on 65th Street. One is the one that we continue to use, and the other is the one that's part of our history. But the one that's part of our history, if someone was not going al pi halacha or had a situation, they would send his koracha home, which meant don't come back. Now, you and I can appreciate this better than boys, but imagine if people's korachas were sent home. How many people would be left in the synagogue? You know something? Today, we're massively different than we were years ago. But imagine if people's korachas were sent home. How many people would be left in the synagogue? Very few. So I'm bringing you a very graphic, in-your-face, headline-type perspective, because as you people build yourselves as fathers, so on, over time, you're going to be faced with a lot of very challenging questions. Okay? You must know the halakha. You must know the considerations. And then you must have a mind and a heart. And that's critical. Because if you don't, halakha will be a weapon to destroy. And that's very important. You with me? Okay, very good. So, this case, the father doesn't say beracha. He doesn't say berachot, right? Now, when I fulfill his obligation to bring him the coffee, I'm effectively putting him in a position where he's going to stumble. Yeah?
Maybe not. So first thing I would say is, again, the consideration of embarrassment. You don't know what that's going to do to the family. So that's a factor in it. And second, you don't know the future 100%. You don't know whether or not he is. Someone can say, I'm never going to do X, Y, and Z, and then
very nice.
Likely give somebody space and they do X, Y, and Z.
Beautiful. So this, yes, honey.
I think it's not a stumbling block because he was going to get it anyway.
He was going to get it anyway. That beautiful. That's great. He would have taken it anyway. So therefore, what do we have? We have he's saying something on a very, very beautiful, lumbish level. You're saying something from the core halachot, you're saying. Yeah? That if I'm providing something, if I can provide something or not to somebody else, and by me providing it, it might be a stumbling block, right? But if they can go and get it someplace else, what's the halakha? It's no longer beautiful, Isaac. It's no longer considered a stumbling block. It's a very, very interesting question. I'm going to give you an example. I'll tell you a very nice example. So there were a number of years when I was very involved with my son-in-law in investing in Israel. And we know retail real estate. That's what I know, right? So what did we do? We tried to focus on that. And it was a great effort. It would have been a super great effort if I was completely focused on that, but I wasn't. I was focused on that, and I was focused on real estate here. So it made it at best a b'diavad. You know, it wasn't great. It could have been phenomenal because we were there at a fantastic time. But, you know, kacha. I didn't have the sensibility to go like this and do it. Okay, in any case, we bought some nice properties. At one point, we were bidding on a property in Eilat, a retail property. And the challenge with Eilat is in Eilat, as opposed to most of the rest of the country, the malls are open on Shabbat. In the rest of the country, when you buy a retail property, you don't have the problem of your property being open on Shabbat or the tenants operating on Shabbat, because most of the country, about 90%, the retail properties are closed on Shabbat. So the other retail things that we had, we didn't have any challenges related to operating the property or anything like that. Yeah? In Eilat, the mall is open. Very good. So we went to the Rishon LeZion, Rav Amar, who was our posek on our business halachic issues in Israel. And we told them, Chacham, listen, we're going to make an attempt to strip out anything related to our efforts as a landlord in the context of Shabbat. I'm speaking to your point. We're going to get to it in a minute.
How about you own the store or you own
The mall. It was a small mall. Okay. Very good. So we said, we're going to strip away the maintenance people. Nobody's working on Shabbat. We're going to put in something automatic in terms of security. No security people. We're going to this or that. We're going to go al-pi, black and white halacha. Thank you. Al-pi, black and white halacha. We're going to strip away anything that will force us to be in a position of activity, of engagement on Shabbat. Okay, very good. We did it. Took us a number of months. We came out with a system. Very good. Then we said, you know what? It still may not look good for frum people to buy a property that's clearly people are mechalel Shabbat. The operators are Jewish, and the customers are overwhelmingly Jewish. And the salespeople, the employees are overwhelmingly Jewish, right? So we said we're going to but we're not operating these stores. So we said, we're going to offer the tenants a discount to close. They said, no way, 35% of my business is on Shabbat. You're going to give me a 10% discount on the lease? Doesn't help me. Thanks anyway. We said, you know what? We're going to buy it in a third-party holding company owned by a goy, and we're going to structure our investment as a loan to the goy. So we have nothing to do with it. Okay, very good. In the end, Rav Amar said, you and your father-in-law, he told my son-in-law, for who you are as people, you're not going to have beracha. Don't do it. And we didn't do it. But to go back, it was a fascinating experience. Fascinating. To be able to see how you could strip away any direct or indirect involvement. Now, you still have Isaac's point, which is, if I'm enabling someone to sell coffee, let's say, in my building on Shabbat, and the Jewish person wants to buy coffee, and I'm enabling that, am I putting a stumbling block before a blind man? And Isaac is talking about a beautiful halachic consideration which says that if the person can buy it somewhere else, the answer is no. If I'm pigeonholing the person, and this was one of our considerations, if I'm pigeonholing the person because I have an exclusive offering, and that exclusive offering is just that, then I'm effectively, if I'm not lifnei iver, if it's not a biblical lifnei iver, if it's not a we're going to talk about this more in a minute, if it's not black and white biblical, It's certainly rabbinic, and there's a related isur, a related prohibition, which is to misayea liyad over avera. I'm helping him. It's not lifnei iver. It's not a classic lifnei iver. Classic lifnei iver is related to just a couple of things which we're going to talk about in a minute. But it's a rabbinic prohibition that I'm aiding and abetting the effort of someone who is mechalel Shabbat in this case.
So you could have bought them all?
So very good. So in fact, to Isaac's point, because we weren't the only mall in town, and the same stores that we had by us were replicated in the much larger mall down the boardwalk, we could have bought them all. From a pure halachic point of view, there's nothing to talk about. And to Isaac's point of putting a stumbling block in front of somebody, the biblical stumbling block is not related to this. We're going to talk about why in a minute. But the rabbinic stumbling block of aiding and abetting someone who's going to be violating a halakha is also not a problem because, to his point, they can get it someplace else. Now, good? Good. Excellent. So go back to our case now. Should someone fulfill his father's request to hand him the cup of coffee, knowing he's not going to make a beracha? Is he putting a stumbling block in front of a blind man? Now, al pi halacha, it's brought down in Masechet Avodah Zarah. We say that a person shouldn't put a cup of wine in front of a nazir, in front of somebody who made a commitment not to drink wine, right? A nazir not to drink wine, not to cut his hair, and so on. That, according to the Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah, that is black and white, biblical, midoraita, isur of lifnei iver, of putting a stumbling block in front of a blind man. If you go ahead and you take a lover of wine who proclaims himself to be a nazir, he's going to take a period of time, let's say a year, and not drink wine for whatever reason that he feels he needs to distance himself from certain things so that he can recalibrate his life, his heart, his values, and get back on a better track afterwards. That's why someone would do something this extreme. Then if you go ahead and as he's walking past you, you stick a beautiful high-grade premium wine in front of him, that's considered lifnei iver mideoraita, biblical. The second case is, the second case is, second case is to take a juicy, raw limb of an animal, that is the best part of the animal, the evim min ahai. You ripped off the leg of this prized sheep, and you put it in front of a ben Noach. You put it in front of a non-Jewish person who, according to the 7 Noach laws, is not allowed to rip food from an animal, rip meat from an animal, rip a leg from an animal, evim min ahai, and eat it. Those, according to our rabbis, are the two biblical cases of lifnei iver, of putting a stumbling block before a blind person. That's it. Okay? Anything else you might call rabbinic. You might call lifnei iver rabbinic. Okay? Or you may say that he's misayeh liyad over avera. So now, go back to our case. According to Isaac's point and the criteria of the Gemara, if somebody brings a cup of coffee for his father, right, who's not going to say a beracha, is he, by fulfilling the biblical obligation to bring him the coffee, is he violating a biblical obligation by putting a stumbling block in front of him because he's going to enable him to eat something without a beracha? The answer is he's fulfilling a biblical, but he's not causing the violation of a biblical, right? No? Talk to me.
I don't know. Those two examples are like weird. One of them is not even a mitzvah, it's an extra thing, no wine. Like, what if someone doesn't want to have cigarettes? And they just they make a neder on not having cigarettes.
They're not a nazir, they're something else.
So nazir is a halachic concept.
A very specific halachic concept, huh?
And the second one is a non-Jew.
That's right.
So saying a bracha is derabanan.
By the way, yes. Excellent. Excellent. So reason it through. Chabod.
I'm saying, what's the level?
Go ahead. No, you're right there. Go ahead.
Is it deraita concept?
I have a Nazir concept which is Doraita. I have Ever Minachai which is Doraita, right? Saying a bracha is Derabanan, right? Very good. Kibud Avayim is
Deraita.
very good. Saying a bracha is
Derabanan.
and therefore,
That's the hierarchy.
So respect, kavod avayim is more important.
very good. But now if I have, beautiful, this is how you build. Good. But now if I have, are you going back to school in September?
In August 25th or so.
Oh man, okay. But now I drop down on my hierarchy, right? Keep with it, Morris. I drop down on my hierarchy. I'm outside of the context of a biblical violation of Kibud Avayim, right? If I bring it, I didn't violate the biblical obligation to honor my father if I brought him the coffee, to our example, right? But I'm dealing with a couple of rabbinics here. I have a rabbinic obligation to say a beracha on one hand, and I have a rabbinic prohibition, which is similar to the biblical prohibition about enabling someone to fail. Misayea biyad over avera. I'm enabling someone to make an avera. Rabbi, what do you want to do? Tell me what I should do. Do you want me to bring Daddy the coffee? Do you want me to not bring Daddy the coffee? Tell me what you want to do. Tell me what you want me to do.
Can't you bring it to him and bring yourself one also and say bracha for him?
Beautiful. Now we're talking. Now we're smart. You heard that? Bring the beracha. Bring the coffee. Say the beracha with him in mind. Tell him, Daddy, I'm going to say the beracha for both of us.
That's a great one.
That's a great one. He may or may not go with you, but
Yeah.
okay, but it doesn't matter. No, that's a sincere effort. That shows respect, right? It shows the weightiness of that mitzvah versus what else we have. What else might you do? Great. What else might you do?
Also avoiding that sensitive, awkward, situation that may, either make them feel bad or if you ask somebody to do something and they say, come on, it's an awkward
Right.
situation and sensitive to, even, especially to the parent, he thinks like he's better than me, or,
Yeah.
people get very sensitive with this stuff.
Good.
I love this example.
Right.
I think it's great.
Beautiful. So that's one way to sort of kilach hayad. Beautiful. Yes.
I
Yeah.
actually thought you were doing that with this example. Like you don't your father wouldn't feel as if you're being rude,
I don't know.
Oh, you're saying
Again,
it for me.
maybe he would, and then maybe you come up with some other terutz, or some other angle, right? We have a related case, right? Someone you're obligated to give tzedakah to the ani, right? And let's say you're obligated to give tzedakah to the ani, and you know that he's going to mix it with chalav. He's going to take this piece of meat that you give him, let's say, and he's going to mix it, he's going to cook it with milk, and he's going to have his meal. So I have the obligation to give tzedakah to the ani, right? At the same time, he's not shomer Shabbat, or he may not be, and therefore he may go ahead and take what I gave him and be mechalel something that's midoraita. Beracha is rabbanan, but basar halab is not. So can I still give him the meat?
He's going to do it anyway, to Isaac's point.
Maybe he's going to do it anyway. Yeah.
It's a guy who's starving.
It's a guy who's hungry. It's a guy who's hungry. If you're going to tell me that there's lifnei iver, we could, if you're going to bring it, include it in the concept of lifnei iver, which we said we're not, then it's a problem. But if we say that lifnei iver is limited to the cases that we brought, then it's not a biblical problem anymore. And I have an obligation to give tzedakah, which is biblical. And I have a chashash of, I have a biblical concern here, right? I have basar b'chalav, cooking basar b'chalav. So what do you want to say in that case? The case came up very interestingly. This halachic consideration came up very interestingly in Israel in recent history, right? Let's say you have a car rental company, right? You own a car rental company, and you rent a guy a car for a week. And as a result of you renting him the car for the week, he's going to drive on Shabbat. Are you responsible for that or no? Let's say you own a hotel. And in the hotel, somebody's going to come, and in your room that you rented to him, he's going to be Mehadel Shabbat. Let's say you sell somebody a pot. No, these are important. These are modern day diyunim. Fascinating. You sell somebody a pot. Ad kedei kach, right? And he may buy the pot from you, or and cook basar b'chalav in the pot. Are you liable for that? Oh, even better. Forget that. That's really out there. But it's something the rabbis talk about, present day. If you're going to sell somebody a pot, and he's going to use the pot to do cooking on Shabbat, do you have a problem selling him the pot? Are you mesayeh liyad biyad over avera? Are you enabling, aiding and abetting?
These cases, if we keep on going, it would just stop. Like when we learned about the interest,
1,000,000%.
they had to have a contract because it was stopping trade.
Excellent.
Like this kid's
Beautiful, Joe. Perfect. So really, in the davar sof, there's no end to this, and everything would fall apart. If I own a building, am I responsible for everything that goes on in the building between in the Jewish family that I rented the apartment to? There's no end. Impossible. Everything breaks down. Okay. Although there are rabbis who say, don't go into the pot business. Don't go into the car leasing business. If you ever leased a car from Erdan in Israel, I don't know if they still do it. I remember this from many years ago. They don't charge you for Shabbat.
It's just weekly.
It's just weekly, right? They don't charge you, right? They don't charge you. So whatever you do with the car, you do. Now, we know that we're not responsible for what someone does with our kelim. We're responsible for what someone does with our livestock. If someone took my cow and worked it on Shabbat to plow the field, I have a problem. Even though they rented the cow for a year, I still have a problem because it's my cow. So what do? If it's a Jew, we have to make sure that they're not going to do it. Some rabbis say that I have to take the cow back every Shabbat. If I know that the person is going to do it, I have to go there and take the cow back. Other people say, Jew or Goy, whoever rented the cow, other people say that you would make the cow hefker every Friday afternoon, make it hefker. It doesn't belong to me, it doesn't belong to anybody. If he uses it, he does what he wants, but it's not mine, so I don't have a problem. But a cow is one thing that falls under the prohibition of Shabbat, and a car is not. A car is a kli. A cow is a behemah. So the cow falls under the biblical prohibition of you or anything attached to you working on Shabbat. The car does not. So at the end of the day, we say that if somebody takes my kelim and does something wrong with it, that's not my problem, it's theirs. Although there is a sensibility to drag me all the way along with it. Fine. Going back to our case, and we're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes. Going back to our case, do you want to hold that we're responsible for the fact that we brought it or not? Let's read a little bit more. Going back to the person we gave tzedakah to. Can we give tzedakah to a person not knowing whether he's going to use the money appropriately or not? The question is, yes, because I can't control that. Can I call it lifnei ver midoraita? The answer is no. Can I call it mesayeh biyad over avera? Maybe. And therefore, if I know the person will deliberately do something wrong, I can't give it to him. Or maybe I shouldn't. Or maybe I should avoid it. Right? Because rabbinically, I'm still aiding and abetting. But what do you mean? I have an obligation to give tzedakah. So at the end of the day, I'm going to give the tzedakah. But the truth of the matter is, I have a back-ended concern. Yeah.
Okay, slight tangent, but I want to talk about, God forbid, lo alenu, a Jewish homeless person. Let's say he has one meal a day.
Yeah.
Somebody gives him an unkosher hot dog.
A homeless Jewish person,
Yeah, wherever he might
and
be.
otherwise he's going to starve.
He's going to starve.
Right. So,
What is-
so that's
what does he do?
sakanat nefashot, and he's going to eat it.
Okay. So
What
is
it-
he not in that case here?
It could be. You're saying that in the tzedakah case, if I'm reading into it, very good. You're saying tzedakah case is life and death.
Yeah.
If it is, there's clearly nothing to talk about. The question is, if it's not life and death, is there something to talk about? That's the question. You would say, and that's where halacha goes, that when I have an imperative to give tzedakah, not knowing exactly how the person is going to use the money, I still have to give the tzedakah. Very good. So let's go back to our case and pull the point together. Ben shoharav enam shomrim Torah mitzvot. A son whose parents are not shomer Torah mitzvot. V'nisa b'darkei noam. Yishadlam levarech al ma'achal or mashkeh shemagish lifnehem. He tried with love and warmth to get them to say a beracha, and they don't. V'lo Allah davar biyado. He wasn't successful in getting them there. Rashai lahagish lahorav divrei ma'achal o mashkeh kefi ma shemibakshim mimeno. He's allowed and he must bring them what they ask from him in food and drink. And he shouldn't be worried at all that by doing this, he is enabling their halachic failure in this context, right? Because we're going to hold, Joe, this is very important. It goes back to what we said earlier. Imam b'derech eretz b'nimus hamukubal ulai titkarev da'atam u'memeshech hazman yitkarvu b'dat lamitzvot. Big deal. This is a big deal. If the person was violating a biblical commandment of Lifnei Ved, you have a problem. I have a biblical imperative to honor my father and a biblical prohibition of putting a stumbling block in front of a blind man. Now I got to break my head. But over here, I have a biblical obligation to honor my father, and I have a rabbinic obligation to say a beracha. So the rabbinic obligation to say a beracha, of course, is super important. Generally speaking, we don't separate any of these things. In practice, we do them with the same vigor and concern. But he says, in this case, we can't claim a biblical prohibition as being violated, and therefore, we're going to tell you, of course, bring the food to them, even though they're not going to say the beracha. Ulai titkarev da'atam. Titkarev da'atam means what? They're going to get closer. You know, they're going to be brought closer. But Meshach Hazman, and over time, Yitkarvu ledat for the mitzvot. Joe, you hear the points. Ulai, maybe, by being tolerant and patient, maybe, Maran says, Titkarev da'atam. Maybe they're going to get closer. And how long is it going to take? Ubemeshech Hazman. And over a period of time, maybe they'll get closer over a period of time. Yeah? The datum himself, im ochel imahem im efshar, tomorrow's his point, yomar lahem sheyachkavnu lebirchato. Like Morris said earlier, if they don't want to say beracha, fine. But tell them, you know, Dad, I'm saying a beracha, come on with me. Or if you can't get with that, say the beracha, as you said, and have them in mind. At least that, even though it's not, technically doesn't achieve much, but ask them to have it in mind when you're saying it. If not, at least have them in mind. Hen beracha rishona, vehen beracha acharona, both for the first and for the last. So, we understand now the halachic pecking order here. that we don't have a biblical prohibition that's being violated, but we do have potentially a rabbinic prohibition that's being violated of a similar position of putting a person in a place where they will fail. If you go back to Isaac's point, which was brought before, being that they can get up and get the item themselves, perhaps you don't have this at all. It's a beautiful point. Okay? But if you're going to hold that they still do, you're still going to do it. Because you have a biblical obligation, you have a rabbinic violation, and you have an overarching goal. And that is not to break things, but to build things. And that's how we would handle it. Okay, Baruch Adonai L'olam, amen, amen.